So how did you personally get into A&R? How did that start?
So I guess I've been working in the industry now about 20 years. I started my own record label in about, it was the end of 2004, 2005. So I was promoting shows at my local uni, at my local venue. Um, there were some really, really cool local bands that were kind of coming through at that point. Um, I had some contacts through, kind of the day to day of what I was doing. And I kind of realized that like there was an opportunity there, that there weren't many kind of grassroots indie, like independent record labels kind of coming through that were representing the music that I was seeing and the music that I've, been into my whole life. Um, so I started a record label.
Was that Basic?
Yeah, Basic Records. Yeah. And we started, just kind of early on. We released like Enter Shikari's first single. We signed local bands like Fell Silent, who went on to form Monuments, Tesseract, Heart of a Coward. Those kind of bands. Signed Bury Tomorrow like really early on. Did their first album. And then just kind of things developed from there really. But I guess my passion has always been working with musicians and working with, especially with songwriters. I do write. I have written in the past, and I've always super buzzed to kind of work with other people that are creating music and creating songs. But to combine that with, I guess back in the day was like a kind of an entrepreneurial spirit where I was just like, I think I can combine these two things. And ultimately that is fundamentally what A&R is. It's having that kind of left brain, right brain thing where you're like, okay, cool, we're going to take this, but we're also going to commercialize it. And it's, so that for me, it was like just a burning passion to kind of, to get into it. And things just grew, from there. And, I put a lot of work in, and, as I said, we formed a PR company around the label in 2010. So that was, 5 years later. Had a publishing company that kind of sat in around that as well. It's been a fun time. It's been a hard work, and it's cost a lot of money, but it's been good fun.
You obviously had some really, really good bands signed to that. I mean,
Yeah.
What was the sort of goal? Was it to grow the label with them, or was it to grow the bands they could be picked up by a bigger label? And
Yeah, a bit of both, really. I think, you kind of need to understand when you're running at that time a really small business, you need to be aware of your position in the market. I'm at that time I couldn't compete with like, massive labels like the one I work for now, even. And so you kind of need to just be a bit more scrappy, a bit more kind of, you actually have to work twice as hard to kind of get in front of everything. But for me, it was about, just like finding new things, taking some bets, but just trusting my gut and my instinct on like what I think is interesting, what I think, like a public in our space, music lovers, music listeners in our space want to hear, is just really important to kind of find those things that could be interesting. I guess the most obvious example of that for me was Sleep Token. I signed Sleep Token in like 2016. And, that was super, super early days. We did that second EP in 2017, I think. But that was, again, just like that whole kind of development phase of trying to find something interesting, trying to find something new that it wasn't the fully formed thing that you see now. Every band and every artist is on that kind of development journey, and, whatever, it's very rough around the edges. But the concept was there, the talent was there. The music and the vision for kind of how to deliver that music was all there. Everybody wants to, see something refreshing. Look, we all love metalcore, or we all love pop punk, or we all love death metal, or whatever. That's all great, and long may those genres reign. But I think it's always interesting when someone comes along with something that's like, oh, that's a bit different. That's how I felt about Sleep Token back in the day. When they, they were like, I kind of want to do this thing. It's like a Sam Smith vocal, but with Meshuggah. And I'm like, what? And I was like, that I can't, that doesn't make any sense. And then when I heard the demos, and then when I heard like, oh, okay, hang on, wow, I can hear a Meshuggah riff underneath this Sam Smith vocal, and somehow it works. It's like, okay, right, this is super interesting.
What sort of deal did you do when you signed Sleep Token? Was that a full record deal? Was it a license? Or?
Yeah, no, it was just a license at that time. So my deals back when I was kind of doing that was super flexible. For me it was just kind of helping to kind of give the artist enough of what they need to get this thing moving, and then kind of put some weight behind it, promote it, paying for PR and radio and all of those kind of things. But in terms of like kind of like big tied down deals, that's never really been my style, and certainly not when I was running my own company and my own label. So so it's kind of So
does that mean there was no back catalogue for you to?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the thing with licensing is that like you are essentially you're exploiting it for a limited period of time, and I think it depends on your viewpoint on that, but I think the industry as a whole is kind of switched a little more to more of a licensing landscape. And I kind of think that's great because it's super artist friendly. There's like tons of stories, not just in our world, but like in the music industry in general, where even Taylor Swift like re-recording her own records because those previous records belong to Universal, which is fine. Universal spent a lot of money on Taylor Swift in the early days, and so you kind of understand it from a business perspective. But obviously, as an artist, as that artist grows, it's like, yeah, I kind of want to own my own records now. So that's where licensing kind of comes into play, where it's like you invest in it for a certain time. The exploitation period of that deal gives you a certain amount of runway to be able to recoup and make that money back, make that investment back. And then, hopefully at the end of that period, everyone's made money and you're like, shake hands and you're done.
With your label Basic, when you were doing those deals, did you get to a point where you were looking at that thinking, actually, I want to keep these bands? Like, you using Sleep Token as the example, if you'd managed to full sign them for a record deal and keep the back catalogue, that would have been
for sure
quite a bit. Like, what was the decision where you were like, that isn't what I want to?
It's I guess it's more just to kind of sometimes it's a decision, but sometimes it's also understanding kind of what your leverage was when you were doing it, when you're in the negotiation period. The stuff that I was doing with Basic is, as I said, just super flexible, super artist friendly. For me, it was important. The thing is that I didn't have a lot of overhead in my business. We had literally a handful of people. We were paying for office space, but it was like shared office space. And so it's not the kind of overhead that like a company that I work for now has. So in terms of what we needed to do and the types of deals that we could have were probably slightly different, just because that's kind of how the business was made up. It's just kind of one of those things. Sometimes it's a decision, and even when we get to the end of license periods with certain bands, we'll renegotiate. We'll say, we would love for this to continue for another few years, and sometimes if we're at the end of that exploitation period, we'll give them a further advance on the next 5 years if we want to extend it by 5 years or whatever. So it's always a conversation. Of course, sometimes there's things that you're just like, this didn't work out. Like no one made any money here. It just didn't work out, and that's the nature of the business. You're not going to win everything. The trick is to just try to make sure you win more than you lose.